Hello, hello, everyone, and welcome to our session on Shakespeare for Fall in Love with Morning Time this afternoon. I am Pam Barnhill. Sometimes I forget to introduce myself, and I apologize. It's like, it's my festival. You should know who I am, but there may be new people here who don't. So I'm Pam Barnhill, and thank you so much for joining us here this afternoon as we talk all about the Bard, which is one of my favorite subjects to talk about. Not always one of my favorite things to teach. And we'll talk about that a little bit. And I'll tell you how Misty Winkler has changed my life when it comes.
I love those stories.
Yeah, those are great stories, aren't they? So I am here with my good friend, Misty Winkler. I'm going to introduce her in just a second. I'm going to give you some technical information. Because this is a parent session, you are allowed to chat with each other. Don't make me turn your chat off. But unlike the kids, we are going to let everybody chat with each other. But tell us who you are, where you're watching from, and what is your experience with Shakespeare? Would you consider yourself like somebody who, like give me a, I love Shakespeare, or a, I would like to love Shakespeare, but I just am not sure, or, oh my gosh, do I have to teach the Shakespeare stuff? So kind of tell me where you are when it comes to Shakespeare. So, we already have somebody. Oh, well, that's Dawn. Morning time host is Dawn. So Dawn is here. She is our morning time host, and she'll be dropping some links for you today.
She doesn't get to call herself inexperienced.
Oh, that's so funny. Oh, we're just here to have a good time. So Misty Winkler is a wonderful friend of mine, and just the person, so like a buddy that helps you is like the best buddy there is, right? So that just is what makes her wonderful. But she is a homeschooling mom of 5 kids, and she is married to her high school sweetheart. And the cool thing about Misty and her husband is Misty was homeschooled, and Misty's husband was homeschooled, and together they're homeschooling. So that's really kind of cool. And she runs the website simplyconvivial.com, which just has a wealth of homeschooling information for the classical homeschooling mom. And she also runs the Convivial Circle. And so you can find, can you drop the link to Convivial Circle for me, Dawn? She has Convivial Circle, and this is for you, the mom. So trying to figure out, how are you going to calm a little bit of the chaos that's in your life? And so often we try to calm the chaos by like hooking up to the latest system. And what Misty teaches us over at Convivial Circle is that satisfaction and joy comes from managing our attitudes and our expectations. And it goes so much deeper than the checklist. And so do go check that out as well, because she'll help you like get your house in order and get your meals in order and get your housework in order. And it all starts with getting your attitude in order. But today we're going to talk about getting your Shakespeare in order. A couple of quick things about the Zoom platform. 95% of your problems with Zoom, actually, I would say like 98% of your problems with Zoom can be fixed by simply restarting. So if you're not able to hear us, if you stop being able to hear us, which means you're not hearing this message right now, but if it stops midstream, or if you stop being able to see us or something goes wrong, just log out and click the link and come back in again. And for the most part, that fixes any problems that you might have. So do that. And nobody's talking to us. Do I have this set up right? Attendees can chat with all panelists and attendees. So let me see. If you don't want to tell us about your experience with Shakespeare, just tell us where you're from. And that'll be fine too. Okay, so I am going to turn this over to Misty, and she is going to tell us a little bit about her approach to teaching Shakespeare, or not even teaching Shakespeare. I'm like, that's a misnomer. So like, forget I said that. Michelle's making dinner in New Hampshire, so she is not chatting. Michelle, could you come make dinner for me, please? Mine is actually thawing on the stove. We're doing frozen pasta tonight that I froze like a couple months ago. But yeah, we're not teaching Shakespeare. We're talking about something else. So I'm going to turn it over to Misty.
All right. Oh, and I will turn off my notifications. Well, welcome. I'm excited to talk about Shakespeare because I love Shakespeare. And I think that kids can love Shakespeare, and I think that you can love Shakespeare too. Even if you are completely unfamiliar with Shakespeare, or you find Shakespeare intimidating, or you just have zero experience, you could just jump right in with your kids, because that's one of the real beauties of homeschooling, is learning alongside our kids. And we can just start with that entry level. Wherever they're at is where we get to start too. And we get to have that full and complete education that we didn't get before, or just expand. I'm not really allowed to say that since I was homeschooled, and my mom might be here. But even homeschoolers have gaps. So
yeah,
we could still be growing and expanding our areas of interest and our loves, including a love of Shakespeare. And so I have kind of a step-by-step method, just a 5-piece plan to do any Shakespeare play. And I should have counted before, but I'm pretty sure we've done 10 Shakespeare plays. I have plans for 8 available on my site. You can get all of these pieces that I'm going to show you, and the resource list that I'm going to talk about is all available in my free Shakespeare resources collection. And I need to build that out a bit more because there's a few more plays that we have that aren't in there, but the main ones are there. And a lot of where I started and how I picked the 5 steps actually comes from the book by Ken Ludwig, which you've probably seen around over the years. Right about when my oldest was 7 or 8, and I thought, maybe we could do a Shakespeare play. I think the local children's theater was doing Midsummer Night's Dream. I was like, we could do that as part of school and like really build that out and have fun getting to know this one play. And that's when this book was coming out, How to Teach Your Children Shakespeare. And this was a new book, and I was like, well, I want to teach my children Shakespeare because I love Shakespeare. And I remember being homeschooled, I remember sitting down, I think it was on TV, the movie by Kenneth Branagh, Henry V. Mm-hmm. And that was my first real exposure to Shakespeare. I was probably 8 or 9, and I watched this movie with my mom and understood not a single bit of what happened, but the costumes were cool. Yeah. So I didn't have to understand what was going on. Like, my mom didn't quiz me. She asked me if I liked it or not. And I'm like, well, the costumes were cool. I didn't understand what they were saying. And that was okay. And then we watched another Shakespeare, which was Kenneth Branagh's Much Ado About Nothing, which is much easier to follow the storyline there. And it has much more funny bits. So that I loved. And so my introduction to Shakespeare, even as a kid, was just through, it's just another kind of movie that you watch.
Right.
And we didn't really study Shakespeare like as a school subject until I was in high school. And that approach worked. And I think that approach is appropriate even for what Shakespeare is, because in his own day, Shakespeare was the equivalent of the Friday night movie.
Right.
It was the popular entertainment of the day. And so we can approach Shakespeare not as a highbrow thing, but as what he was, which was just mainstream entertainment. And when we do that, we really are seeing Shakespeare for what he really was and what he was trying to be, and meeting him on his own terms.
So when you got to high school,
so the 5 steps. I lay them out a little bit differently than he does, but I first got them from the Ken Ludwig book, which has a lot of fun stories and a lot more of why you should study Shakespeare. The short reason is it's fun and it's great English. It's just fun to say, and that's a part of what we're going to learn today.
Okay, I was going to ask you a question, and I didn't know if you could hear me. Can you hear me?
I can't hear you. I can't hear you because I turned my sound off.
I'm like, she doesn't usually ignore me like this. What's going on? So when you got to high school and you started, so, you'd had this long exposure. Well, and it probably wasn't long. It was probably just kind of random exposure.
It was random. It was totally random.
Not like your mom did this all the time, right?
Yeah.
When you got to high school and you started approaching Shakespeare, then, was it intimidating to you at all? I mean, of course it was, but I mean, how did you feel about it in the approach? I mean, because of your past experience, were you just kind of like, okay, this is just one thing we do?
When I got to high school, I think my mom thought, well, we should do some Shakespeare. And so she gave me a couple books, which was her approach to homeschooling. And it's very similar to mine. I'm like, so here are some books. And it was Peter Lightheart's Brightest Heaven of Invention, which it has like analysis of the plays. So I did Taming of the Shrew, and we watched the movie first, actually, because my mom was already a Shakespeare was meant to be seen person. So I got that from her. And so we watched the, what's her face? Taylor. Is it Elizabeth Taylor? Richard Burton version of Taming of the Shrew.
Yeah.
Which is just a fun movie. I mean, it's just ludicrous. So that kind of sets the stage and the tone that this play, Taming of the Shrew, is just kind of ridiculously funny. It's not super intellectual. And then reading the analysis was interesting to me. I don't know, because I'm that type of person. I liked reading a book about Shakespeare while reading the Shakespeare. Although I do remember, I still have a very vivid memory of having, like my Folgers edition of Taming of the Shrew, which has explanations for all the puns. Mm-hmm. And so I think that was definitely experience broadening for me in high school too, so not just double entendre, but like triple entendre. I'm like, whoa, okay, my mom's letting me read this. This is something.
so a couple of caveats here, because you also mentioned Branna's Much Ado About Nothing earlier. Don't go and get that and just pop it into the DVD player for your kids. That's like number one. Watch that one first, or you actually make note of those things in your free Shakespeare plans, right?
I do.
The movies you've watched, you actually say, because there's a little bit of skinny dipping at the beginning of that.
You see only bottoms and backsides, but you do see bottoms and backsides that are bare.
Yes. So just to be aware that is there. And then a lot of moms get the idea that, oh, well, let's take my middle schooler or my high schooler and the high school, we're getting into, but let's take my upper elementary and my middle schooler and let's give them these great versions like No Fear Shakespeare that have like the literal like the modern day English translations. Sometimes you want the stuff in Shakespeare to go above their head.
Yep.
So don't always feel like
that's just another layer that they get to understand later in their life when they're ready for it.
Yeah. And I think this comes into, Shakespeare is something where you're going to visit and revisit. Like, you don't have to feel like, we have to fall in love with Shakespeare. We have to do all the Shakespeare. We have to understand all the Shakespeare before they leave. He just becomes like a piece of our life that we visit again and again. And we always gain deeper appreciation of him as we go. Okay. So I was approaching Shakespeare when I started looking at Shakespeare in my homeschool and at co-op. I was approaching it like I had been taught Shakespeare, and being an English major, I had a full semester course on Shakespeare.
I did too.
Yeah, in college. And so And like, it just like, I'm not a Shakespeare expert. And my personality is like, well, if you're not an expert on something, you can't like teach it really, really well. And so I knew I was just going to be horrible at it. And I don't know, I just like this big mental block came up.
Mm-hmm.
And then I went and got Misty's plans, and it made a world of difference for me. So let's talk about your approach.
So I have 5 steps that we kind of go through more or less in order. And so I'll go through those briefly, and then we'll go through each of the 5. So first, we read a storybook version of the play. So a retelling that's at the child's level. So they just get the second, and this is where I went with Ludwig. Second, before we do anything else, we actually start memorizing lines. And so we'll get more into that. And then third, going back to what my mom did, we watch a movie version of it. Or we see a local production too, if we can. Then 4, we listen and read along to the play. So I know some people will do, like everyone has a copy and they take different parts and read it aloud together and like experience as a family. And that's a great option too. But I have a lot of reasons why I think that actually listening to an audiobook version, the Archangel series are really good. While reading along helps with comprehension and a whole lot of other things. So that's 4 is actually digging into the real 100% Shakespeare play. The full thing, unabridged, the whole meal deal. And then step 5 actually can be woven in throughout, but the 5th step is playing the play. And that doesn't have to mean producing a whole play or one scene or anything. It can include that. But any kind of interaction that the child personally has with the story is playing the play. So this might be narration, where they're just summarizing each bit as you listen to like 15 minutes of it and then have them say what the action was. This can be using Duplo or Lego characters, like while they're listening. They can be like moving the people around. The best is, at the end of Hamlet when all the characters are flat out on the floor. It can be one thing, we've done comic strips where each reading they draw one picture and by the end they have a comic strip version of their own. Or even they all get an index card and draw one scene, and then their siblings or friends or whoever is with us has to guess which character or scene they've drawn. Just different things. There are also finger puppets and paper dolls and all kinds of options for just kind of getting them to play with it.
I love that. And it's so easy and it's so doable. And you as a mom, you're just doing it right along with them.
Yeah. You don't have to have even read the play before at all to do this. You can be doing it right along with them without any preparation ahead of time.
Yep. And here's the thing. This is like going back to high school English class, and it's still happening in high school English classes everywhere. It is so not cheating to read a version of the plot. We get in our head that like old Cliff Notes are bad. If you cannot find a good picture book version of the play, you could totally read the summary from Cliff Notes and it would be okay. Wouldn't be as delightful as a picture book, but it would serve the same purpose. And so we get this idea in our head that, picture books are not good, or our plot summaries are not good, or that it's somehow cheating to watch ahead of time too.
Right.
And this is so not the case, because Shakespeare was never meant to be read. You would never take a book of Shakespeare to bed in Elizabethan times. They were
movie scripts.
You wouldn't take a movie script to bed now. Nobody would ever say, "Oh, I read all the scripts of Downton Abbey. It was fabulous." You don't do that. And so
You
that's
watch
how,
it for the costumes.
yeah, that's how ludicrous the concept of just reading Shakespeare is. But why do we go back and read it, Misty? If we could just like, get a plot summary and watch it, why do we even bother? Why do you bother going back and reading and listening?
I think because in that when we do visit the text itself, it's a little bit slower than a movie. You can do it in pieces, and it helps us really become immersed in the language, which is one of the strengths of Shakespeare. It's these fun stories, and that's really how we are meant to experience them, as fun stories in beautiful, rich, imaginative language. And so I think that by listening and reading to Shakespeare, we help our kids, yes, expand their vocabularies, but beyond that, even just language patterns and things that you can do, just the word play in Shakespeare, the more familiar you are with the language, the more you're going to understand those movies that you watch, or understand other Shakespeare plays, understand other things that have complex language. By giving them the storybook version and the movie version, and then immersing ourselves all together in the language of the play, we all broaden our capacity to comprehend wordplay, which is what Shakespeare is full of.
Yeah. I mean, think about how many words he invented.
Yeah.
And then how many phrases and allusions, and I'm not talking about illusions, but allusions, literary allusions, come from Shakespeare. And so, or even just in conversations that you have with people,
One of my favorites is like the Valentine sweets to the sweet little saying is Shakespeare, except that's what Queen Gertrude says as she throws flowers on Ophelia's grave. When we use that for Valentine's, it's like taking that pretty much out of context. Or the milk of human kindness. That's Shakespeare, but it's actually Lady Macbeth bemoaning the fact that Macbeth has too much of the milk of human kindness to kill the king.
Oh, interesting. Interesting. So at our house, we have a dog named Caesar. And
Nice.
so Olivia's new thing is she's teaching him to play dead. But she, instead of like doing the bang bang thing, she gets a knife and says, "Et tu, Brute," and he's learning to fall over dead. So even just coming to my house, you're not going to get it if you haven't read the Shakespeare. We read Julius Caesar a couple years ago. So
it's fun. And there really are just bits like that throughout all of the plays that can so easily just become part of your family culture and family jokes. It really doesn't have to be, you don't have to have an intellectual family culture to have inside Shakespeare jokes.
Right.
They're that accessible. They really are.
Yep. Okay.
So step number 1 is a storybook version. And I know in a lot of homeschool curriculum or advice out there, the go-to retelling collections are Lamb's Shakespeare retellings and Nesbitt's. And I have to admit that I no longer even own them, because I decided I don't want to own books I don't like.
Okay, this is where Misty crushes hearts everywhere. Okay, and if you like Lambs and Nesbit's, it's okay.
More power to you.
But she's going to tell you why it's okay not to like it. Go ahead.
So I don't like the style that Lamb and Nesbitt wrote in. They were Victorians. I have a thing. I don't like the Victorian style. It is so much the opposite of Elizabethan English. What the Elizabethan English was and what Victorian English, those two cultures are very, very different. And I think that so Nesbitt and Lamb made Shakespeare appropriate for their time, and it's not authentic to Shakespeare. And we live in an authentic time now, right? So authenticity is important. So I think Shakespeare should be in Shakespeare's style and let him be Elizabethan, which includes letting him be bawdy, quite honestly.
Okay, so what picture book? I know I'm gonna have a talk with that Dawn about, like, you can't bash the guests when they're on here. But okay, so what can we use? Because Lambs and Nesbit are like some of, like, they're the ones that everybody says to do.
They're the classics. There are there are so many great options. So I always do my best to look for picture book versions. So just where they're single books. So you read them just like you would any picture book. And these are with our picture books. So the kids can just pick them up and read them anytime. And they do, especially because they are just beautifully illustrated. So I try to collect the Bruce Coville versions. So this one's his Romeo and Juliet. The illustrators for his book are always different. He is the reteller, Bruce Coville. They are mostly out of print, so you have to hunt for them. But they are always worth picking up when you can. And there are others, like by is it Marianne Myers, and others that just have beautifully illustrated and retold single book, picture book versions of Shakespeare. And I always prefer those when I can get them. And yes, the collection of lesson plans and resources that I have for Shakespeare includes which book or retelling I've used for each one. There are a lot of plays that don't have a picture book version. And so I can usually still find a retelling in my two favorite collections. So this would be like the equivalent of Lambs and Nesbit, but better. My favorite one is by Tina Packer. So she has Tales from Shakespeare. And this one has Midsummer Night's Dream, Hamlet, Much Ado About Nothing, King Lear, As You Like It, Macbeth, The Tempest, Othello. We haven't done that one. Twelfth Night, Romeo and Juliet.
Can you hold it up and let us see the cover? Okay.
That's the cover.
And if you're looking for links to any of these, all the links to all of these are in those lesson plans, those free lesson plans that Misty has for you.
And she has a different illustrator illustrate each play. So Tina Packer is the reteller. And then she has different illustrators for each play that kind of give the play its vibe a little bit. And it's sparsely illustrated, which is why I tend to favor the picture books. Each play just kind of has one big picture and then a couple little illustrations sprinkled throughout. And then if it's not in this one, then it's definitely going to be in Leon Garfield's collection. He has two big collections like this, and I would have to go through and see which plays he doesn't have.
So he has most.
Yeah. So Leon Garfield, and these are a bit longer retellings. We usually take 3 sittings instead of, if it's a picture book, it'll probably be 1. If it's Tina Packer, it'll be 2. And if it's Leon Garfield, so it'll be 3 sittings.
Okay,
so it's a little bit longer.
How long is a sitting?
15 or 20 minutes.
So when you sit down to work on Shakespeare, that's about how long you take at any given time?
Yep. We do it for about 15-ish minutes twice a week.
Okay.
And we do 2 or 3 plays a year that way.
Okay.
Yep. So after we do a retelling, then we do some memory work. And so that's the only thing that I've done ahead of time really is pick lines that we're going to memorize. And so I try to pick the ones that are just culturally very well known or that I think will be fun for our family. I've found some good places that just help me find the right things to pick. And the memory work selections that I've picked are in those lesson plans. as printables. So right now, my younger kids and I are doing Midsummer Night's Dream, which is a great one for starting off with because it's just it's a fairy story. And so one of the short things that we memorize is, "Captain of our fairy band, Helena is here at hand, and the youth mistook by me, pleading for a lover's fee. Shall we their fond pageant see? Lord, what fools these mortals be." And so you can see each line there. I'll hold this up, and I can kind of, if I know what it's going to say, I can kind of read it backwards. But for the first couple of weeks, I'll just read one line, and then they'll say it back. So it's a little bit call and response. Mm-hmm. And so I'll try to say it with the expression that I would like them to say it in. And then after about 2 weeks, we just do it all together. But I still hold up the pages.
And usually they have it by what? Maybe about week 3 or something? They've got it and you're just reviewing?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and that part of it is just a fun way to start off our Shakespeare time. You know, when they get to be teenagers, then they don't so much like the call and response and the funny bits that we do. But actually what I've done now with my more high school age kids is we read the section and they have Post-it flags and they pick a favorite line or something to share at the end. And we'll pick some of those to review and become familiar with. So they get a little bit of ownership and they have to be like thinking. And so we do kind of change the approach when they get into high school. But this is just
interesting.
A fun way. I think that kids, you know, familiarity does not breed contempt. It breeds affection. Mm-hmm. And so when they are themselves saying these words, what's really fun is when that quote that we've been memorizing comes up in the audio, they get all excited and it's like theirs. Yeah. And that's the feeling that we want them to have. Like, this is mine. I know this.
It's so funny because I had Amy Sloan on last week talking about memorization, and she was talking about her 4-year-old who, you know, she's doing Shakespeare and memorization in morning time. Well, she's just doing memorization in morning time, and they were memorizing some Shakespeare. She said, you know, I didn't even think this kid was listening. And they were listening to an Archangel play in the van last week, and they got to some of the lines from their memory work, and she said he like yelled out from the back, "I know this one." And so, you know, he totally had taken ownership of those lines. So I love that.
Yeah. That's just so fun to see. And that's really the response. That's part of the whole goal. So that really helps. Then the third step is watching a movie or a live production. It's always worth looking and seeing if you have high schools or children's theater or local theater companies doing Shakespeare. I'm very grateful. I have a local friend who always keeps up on who's doing what Shakespeare, and she just tells me where to go.
Love it.
So we already know, because she has her network, that the local Catholic high school, which always does an awesome job, is doing As You Like It this spring. So we put that on our list, and that's what we will make sure that we have in our class time, read the picture book version and memorize some lines. And then that will be you need a movie version because we'll go see it live.
Right. And I do want to point out, so this is where my kind of type A person gets like really, so, you know, I would start scouring the things to see like, when is the Shakespeare? And, I don't like any of those plays. And, well, we just missed it. They did it 6 weeks after we finished. It's okay. Just go see the play. It doesn't all have to perfectly line up. Right.
Yeah. A lot of times we don't know before. And so, but if we're going to, you know, we try to make it a goal to see some Shakespeare live every year. I used to say, we should make it a goal, like every Shakespeare that's local, we should go see. And our town is not that huge, but there's a lot of Shakespeare, and we have a company that likes to turn Shakespeare on its head type thing. It's like, hey, we're not going to go see your productions. You have to do a little research sometimes on those local companies, same as with movies.
And even with even if it's like, so we went a couple years ago, actually I say a couple, Olivia was 9 when I took her to see A Midsummer Night's Dream at the a university near us. And we called and checked and said, you know, is this appropriate for kids? You know, we have kids who are very familiar with the story, you know, but is it appropriate for kids? And other than, you know, Titania's costume was not what I would wear to the grocery store, but.
Well, and you have be careful asking if it's appropriate, because so our local company that likes to have an agenda with their Shakespeare, they did Midsummer Night's Dream a couple years ago, and instead of 2 girls and 2 boys, it was just 4 girls.
And they would have told you that was appropriate.
They would have said it was appropriate. Yes, there was nothing indecent, according to their standards. Whereas when we called and asked if their production of Macbeth was appropriate, they were like, well, depends on your kid, you know, be careful. And it was Macbeth, and it was great, but it was Macbeth.
Yeah, so do a little research, maybe see if even if you have to wait past opening night to buy your tickets and kind of get a feel for what the show is from other people. So yep,
for sure. But remember that Shakespeare, their scripts, they were meant to be seen and performed, and so that yes, movies and local producers interpret in different ways, but that was going on even at the time. And that's one of the actual beauties, and one of the reasons Shakespeare is so timeless, is that it can adapt to different interpretation. There is wiggle room for what does this really mean, or is Hamlet really crazy or not? You know, how it's portrayed is going to influence how much you believe the ghost or believe Hamlet, and that's all actually intended in there. So there isn't a one correct version.
And that's what makes it kind of cool.
It is, really.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, so we've read the story version, we've memorized some lines, we've watched the play. Now
we get to do the real thing. So what we do is we watch the movie, you know, over the weekend or some other time, but during our class time, our morning time, I will get usually the Archangel production, and we will listen to about 15 minutes. You know, we'll try to end at an act when there's music playing. It's like, okay, that's our cue, we'll stop now. And the readers will follow along in, mostly I try to get Dover thrift editions of the plays. They're really small and easy for kids to use and follow along. The print is a good size. And what I like about them is that they have none of the explanations. There's no notes. They have a little bit of, if a word means something completely different than it does now, they will have a footnote, but it doesn't explain all the jokes. So we follow along while listening. And what I like about using an audiobook is that you are hearing actors perform it. And the actors know what they're saying, and that actually makes a difference in reading aloud and comprehension.
Yeah.
When you can hear someone who knows what he's saying and knows if it's a joke or knows if it's sad, you know, the inflection helps us understand. And so relying on some actors there to perform Shakespeare for us in audio form helps everyone understand what's going on better, especially when it's like Archangel or some of the others. And there will even be different people reading the different parts. Mm-hmm. So it really is an audio performance that's unabridged.
Yeah. And music and sound effects. And,
Yeah.
if there are ghostly sounds, there are ghostly sounds, and,
Yeah.
waves crashing. If there's a storm, you can hear it. So it really does bring the reading to life.
Mm-hmm. Because our point is that we want them to understand what they can and to enjoy it. And so if we are having a hard time reading Shakespeare aloud, or we're asking them to read it out loud and they're having a hard time, then, we're kind of making Shakespeare a struggle.
Mm-hmm.
But just following along on the page while listening, we can do that. And there are sound effects, and so it's different usually than other stuff that we're doing in our lessons. And so the variety and all of that just helps it be one of the fun things that we do. So we just go through it about 15 minutes at a chunk, and until we're done. And it usually takes 6 to 8 weeks to finish one play.
Okay. And then as you go along, they're doing step 5, right?
Yeah. Sometimes we will take a break and replace the listening time with a drawing activity. Or sometimes when they were pre-readers, I would sometimes have them drawing while listening instead of following along. Right now, I have everyone following along, but in just the way that our morning time, it's our elementary lessons, but it's like our second morning time with age-segregated morning time. I just have 15 minutes to do Shakespeare. So if we do one of the play versions, which we will take 2 or 3 class times per play, at least, to play with the play. Sometimes that's a character diagram on the board. Sometimes that's, and actually what's fun is when they play with the play on their own time.
Right.
That also counts. They set up that's the scene they're setting up with their Legos, or what they're drawing in their free time. Or there are also some great Dover coloring books with a coloring page for each play. Sometimes instead of following along, we have used those. So
lots of different ways to interact with the play. Yeah. Okay. Yep. Awesome.
And that's it.
All right. Well, as we're finishing up here, if you have any questions for Misty about what she does or how she does it, and don't forget to go get those free lesson plans. This is what I do. Like when it's time to teach Shakespeare at co-op, or if it's time to do Shakespeare here at the house, I head over to Misty's website. I always choose a play that she has already done because she's done all the work for me. And I print out the memory work, and I look at the movie recommendations and the book recommendations, and I get my books and my movie and my audio book, and I am ready to go in minutes, like completely ready to go.
I will say this, if you've not done Shakespeare before, Midsummer Night's Dream is a good one to start with, but that tends to be a favorite with girls and less so with boys. So if you have a mostly boy group, I would recommend starting with Taming of the Shrew, because it's just over the top, slapstick, ridiculous. The people are just completely misbehaving most of the play, so boys love it.
Okay. So that's a good comedy to start with if you have a lot of boys. So, yep. And I was on, when Amy was on the other day, I'm trying to remember what play she was talking about, but I was on, I think it maybe was Much Ado About Nothing, David Tennant. It was the Archangel version, and David Tennant was the narrator. And I went to check it out on Amazon, and it was $7 for the audio.
Wow.
So watch those Archangel versions. Because you can get them for inexpensive.
You can. I actually just heard from a friend, and I think Dawn already put the link. Archangels are now free. Like, I've spent years building up my collection, and now they're just free online.
Okay. So, Dawn, if you didn't put the link, you need to send it to me. So don't, and I guess the benefit to buying it, and I haven't looked at how, I haven't looked at like how they download and things like that, but the benefit of spending your $7.95 would be like, it's in my Audible app.
It's in Audible. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm not sad. I just pull up the Audible app and hit play again, and it keeps track of where we're at. So the Audible app really makes it easy to use.
Yeah. Yeah. So these are really, really inexpensive. You can find them inexpensively. And Dawn says her Echo plays I think she's talking about the Audible one there. Yeah. Or if you want to do a little more work and it be a little less convenient, apparently you can get them for free now. So it's pick your poison. So you're going to spend time or money.
Yep. Always everything.
Yeah. All right. I am not seeing a lot of questions, which must mean that you just did such a fabulous job.
I'll go with that.
But yeah, and do go get those Shakespeare plans and just try one. Like give it a try with your kids and play with it and have fun with it. And if you have some younger kids, the only thing I would say, Misty alluded to this at the end, when her kids were younger, she didn't make them follow along on the reading. I think it's very helpful to do that, especially as they get to that older elementary age, middle school and high school for sure. But if you have some kids who are reluctant readers or who are pre-readers or struggling readers where it's just going to be a struggle for them to follow along, let them draw the picture, color the picture, do the Legos, whatever, while they're listening.
Mm-hmm.
So, all right.
Yep.
All right. Well, Misty, thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you. This was fun. I like talking Shakespeare.
It was a lot of fun. We can talk Shakespeare anytime. So you guys have an awesome, awesome day, and we'll be getting the replay for this one up for you. So thanks so much.
Bye.
Bye.